But what I can indicate is that if we took Bosasa as a starting point, one of the questions I repeatedly asked the management of Correctional Services was how did we end up being in a situation where we have had to use violence year in, year out to fund this outsourced service, because clearly it seemed to me that funds year in, year out had to be diverted in order to support this contractual arrangement. But I've also asked, how did we end up in a situation where so many years down the line we have not been able to develop our own in-house capacity to provide catering for our inmates in the big centers where Bosasa has been providing the service, and end up in this often referred to evergreen contractual arrangement. And the kind of explanations I've been given was that the catering equipment at those big centers became obsolete, and it became unaffordable for the department to replace them. And as one of the factors that led to outsourcing, and I was listening to some of the testimony at the Zondo Commission, I was wondering, was this response some narrative that was artificially created to justify something that was not genuine? I suppose the truth will finally prevail. So I have been myself deeply concerned since I took office about this perpetual outsourcing of what I have always had doubt was absolutely unavoidable. The National Commissioner has advised me that in the light of these revelations, they are working on reviewing the whole arrangement, and I look forward to a report soon from him as to the prospects of us extricating ourselves out of this and restoring our own insourcing of this service. And I know that even though I'm awaiting a fuller report, that he is interacting with a number of relevant state institutions in this regard. So I was not necessarily assuming that this was a manipulated arrangement, as appears to have been from, if one judges from some of the revelations that are being made. And this leads me to the second strain of this matter, or leg of it, and that is the SIU report that has also since been featuring at the Zondo Commission, relating to a finding regarding irregularity of the of some component of that arrangement, where our understanding is that the SIU had directed to previous management of corrections that the contractual arrangement be reviewed and certain legal action taken because of the irregular award, if I understood correctly, of the tender at the time, and where apparently such action was not taken. Obviously, that's a matter that is also being looked at. And talking again of SIU investigations, you know that at some point last year, the SIU revealed a quite significant number of investigations that it concluded and submitted reports in terms of its own legislation to the NPA for prosecutorial decision, which of course, as I understand it, first gets referred to the police, or specifically DPCI, and based on the investigation, then prosecutorial decisions are taken. When that report came through, we had a meeting with the head of the SIU and of the acting NDPP, and agreed that between them and the head of the DPCI, there would be an in-depth investigation as to what actually happened to all those matters after they were referred to the NPA by the SIU. And it includes the Bosasa contract issue and the SI report in that regard, as I mentioned earlier. At the time when I asked the acting NDPP as to why in that specific case no criminal action had been forthcoming, the response I got was that the NPA's, the response to the NPA from the DPCI was that a forensic report that required some funding needed to be commissioned by the investigative authority, and that had stalled proceeding with the matter between the DPCI and the NPA. I must confess that I'm not particularly technically sufficiently equipped in this regard to have been able to question the veracity or the credibility of this. Safe to say that I felt that the matter did warrant to be pursued, and indeed we are awaiting a more comprehensive report following the interaction between the three law enforcement agencies, SIU, DPCI, and the NPA, on all these matters that had been referred, so that, as you know, in terms of the NPA, I can request written reports on certain matters, and in fact, from time to time, I do request those reports to appraise me of what has actually happened in a specific matter. So we're awaiting that, and that would give us a sense. The NDPP alludes to the fact that we are in discussion around issues of capacity, and I know a question was asked about reintroducing a Scorpion-type investigative entity within the NPA. Those are details which I think once all the work around developing dedicated capacity to respond fully and effectively to the revelations that are coming out of the various commissions, will come through. So perhaps the other aspect relating to the Bosasa matter, if you like, that I could allude to is the security arrangements at the State Capture Commission premises, where a Bosasa-linked company is said to have provided service. This has been the matter where I have had ongoing discussions with the Deputy Chief Justice, with the DG of Justice as accounting officer. As you know, all commissions of inquiry are supported by the Department of Justice, and therefore the DG of Justice is the accounting officer. Insofar as administrative support is concerned. And we have finally reached a point where the department has, as I understand it, commissioned a forensic investigation to establish as to whether indeed a tender was irregularly awarded for the provision of that service, and who was responsible for such irregular award between the department and the Secretariat of the Commission. And in due course, I guess between ourselves, the accounting authority at the Department of Justice, and the chair of the Commission, we should be able to provide more reliable information as to what transpired and as to, therefore, what appropriate course of action needs to be taken. But I was also advised by the department that the forensic investigation that they're conducting will go into the entire history of procurement of Bosasa-linked procurement of security services to the Department of Justice, so that we can establish whether at any point dating back to when the relationship commenced, any irregularity had occurred, and to establish who was responsible for that. So that work is underway. In the meantime, obviously, let me also indicate that my understanding, save for the services that are the subject of the current situation with the security features at the state capture inquiry, the department advises me that they are no longer having ongoing contractual relationship with the affected company, as that has since terminated towards the end of last year, I think around September or so. So what is outstanding there It's just that additional element, which would have been sought to be procured by way of extending what was initially a contractual arrangement that pre-existed between the department and that company, to include the installation of security features at the commission venue. So of course, once all the information is clarified and the evidence, the relevant law enforcement agencies will be able to make a fresh look at things and see who should do what by when, in order to pursue whatever matters that require action. Sorry for that long, protracted explanation. I just thought, in the interest of transparency, let me share the much that has been brought to my attention. The allegations of bribes, whether I was aware of them, that are coming through at the inquiry into the fitness to hold office of the two deputies. That is completely new information to me. I at no stage had reason to suspect, and never had any inkling of any such manipulations that are coming through. Was I too hands off? I know whenever, we as politicians have interacted with this institution, the first suspicion was, is it with the intention to interfere politically? I've generally adopted an attitude of allowing the institution the space to do its work, and never really tried to act as a hawk, always hovering over it, unless issues arose. And whenever challenges arose, I took time to come to this headquarters to engage with management on those issues, and I've done so on a number of occasions. But I've also invited members of the institution, as I did members of all other entities I'm responsible for, to come forward. I've always adopted an open door policy, and I've always used the expression that my chief of staff is not a door to my office. He tries and helps in organizing my schedule, but anybody who wishes, and I continue to keep that door open. I have always kept it open. So I would have expected that people who wished to raise serious issues of concern, such as are emerging, to have come on the sidelines even to share some of this information, so that we could have acted on some of it. But that's as far as I'll take it. I don't know if there are any specific questions that I may have missed or forgotten that you may want to follow up on.